Welcome to the podcast, Let the Prophet Speak. Today we continue our study of the book of Job, the Sefer Iyov. We are up to chapter 26, that is Perek Chaf Vav. And we are about to read Iyov's response to Bildad. This is the third round of conversations between Iyov's friends and him, and it is also the final round. And we just heard from Bildad, which he was the second of the three friends, and that's going to be it. This is the end of our of the rounds between the three friends and Iyov. They've reached an impasse. They've reached a point where there's really nothing more to say, and that's going to be driven home even more when we hear Iyov's response to Bildad. At this point, the friends think that Iyov is just intransigent, just refuses to listen. Refuses to repent of his obvious evil ways, because they understand that if he's suffering, it must be because he's punished by God. He must have something to repent for. Iyov, on the other hand, who is exasperated, he's exhausted, he has suffered so much, and for no obvious reason, despite the fact that Iyov has searched his ways, searched his life, and finds nothing to repent for. And so Iyov wants to know the answer from God. Why? What's the point? What's the point of living a life of suffering if I don't get rewarded for the good deeds that I've done, and I get punished despite the fact that I haven't done any wrong to deserve this kind of punishment? The one point that they both agree on is the greatness of God. So all of the parties have expounded tremendously on the greatness of God and the smallness of man, but for very different conclusions, right? Bildad, Eliphaz, they have concluded that because God is so great and man is so small, it must be man is deserving of punishment. Every man is deserving of punishment. Therefore, he should just repent and turn to God, and he'll be fine. And they insisted that God's justice is something that we see, that ultimately we will see all of the evil be punished and all of the good be rewarded. Iyov, on the other hand, says, no, that's not what we see in this world that we live in. Yes, God is great, but God is so great that he's beyond us. We cannot understand him. We cannot comprehend him. And therefore, we cannot comprehend anymore why I am suffering, why good people suffer, why bad people sometimes often prosper. This is something we'll never understand. Understanding God's ways is so far beyond us that we cannot understand that. Iyov over here, after Bildad's last speech, which was pretty small, where he just talked about the greatness of God, the smallness of man, and therefore the man is always a idea similar to the idea of original sin. Man is so small, so useless, so worthless, so tiny, worms, full of worms, maggots, etc., that therefore he must deserve punishment. Every person deserves punishment. Vayan Iyov vayomar. However, Iyov responds and says as follows. The next few chapters is going to be Iyov's response. We're going to see a change in tone here. But first, Iyov is just completely exasperated, completely exhausted by his friends, and totally frustrated. Me ozarta, this is verse 2. Lilo koach. What have you... Now, again, if you go through the commentaries, you'll see numerous pathways and ways to understand these chapters, as has been until now in these chapters. My understanding is based on kind of a mix. I'll mention various paths of different commentaries if I'm completely going along their paths, but it's after putting together, all the different commentaries, understanding them, and then, of course, reading through it myself, and some of this comes from the words themselves. That's how I kind of put together my interpretation, my translation and understanding of these verses. Me ozarta lilo koach. What have you done to help the one who has no strength? Again, some people understand this to mean, how have you helped without any strength? But what I understand this to mean is, how have you helped the one who has no strength? In other words, your words have not helped people like me who are out of strength, who are exhausted. Hoshata Zeroa Lo Oz. How have you given help, saved with your hands, with your arms, the one who has, again, no strength. Oz is just a different word for strength. It could be might or power. Maya atzta lilo chachma. Now this is a key phrase here. What kind of advice have you given? What kind of wisdom have you given to the one who lacks wisdom? What Eov is saying here, and we're going to see in the upcoming chapters, is what Eov is looking for is chachma, is wisdom, understanding. If only he understood, and this is a theme that's been repeated over and over again, if only understood what the point is, right? Eov came to the realization that we'll never understand God's ways. We'll never see God's justice, so to speak. God is just, but we don't see it, we don't know it, we don't perceive it. But then what's the point? What's the point of living this life if we don't see that reward for what we do, and we can get punished and suffer despite not deserving it? We'll understand soon that Eov is going to come to the realization, but this is not yet. I'm kind of giving a spoiler here, and that is that Chachma itself, wisdom itself, is what we're looking for. But this is a slight hint, and I'm kind of letting out a spoiler because I want you to understand that and pick that up from this verse here, verse 3. What wisdom have you given? This is what he's saying to Bildad. To he who has no chachma, who has no wisdom. V'tushiyah l'rov hodata. Right? And you're giving all this, and you've given all this advice. You've let us know all of this tushiyah, all of this counsel. So much of it you've given out. But what point have you? At mihi garta milin, to whom have you spoken all of these words? You were saying, you've spoken these words to me. I know this stuff. Giving me more speeches about how great God is and how small man is. Who are you talking to? Look who you're talking to. V'nishmat mi yatz'ami meka. And the literally means the neshama, the soul of whom, in other words, the breath of whom is coming from you. In other words, which wise man are you quoting, or which genius are you quoting when that's coming out of your mouth, that you're saying all of these words of wisdom? What you're saying is useless. And then he says, Harifaim, and there's different ways to understand this. The hay here, what is the hay? The hay hayadiyah? Is it the hay of a question? I'm going with the Ramban here, and that this is in the form of a question. Harifaim, which refers, according to most of the commentaries, Rifaim here is a word referring to people who are past, the dead. Harifaim yicholalu, are the dead people trembling? In other words, are you giving such wisdom that the dead are now trembling with this wisdom? Mitachat shamayim v'shochdem, those that are resting beneath the underwaters, and those that reside next to them, and all of those. In other words, are they the ones who? In other words, are you talking to me? Are you talking to the world? Are you talking to your lecture, your class in college? Who are you talking to? Talking to all the dead, the denizens of the deep? Are they getting wisdom from this genius words of yours? Arom sheol negdo, right? The dead, they don't need, right? The Sheol, the hell, is naked before he who is dead. He's the dead. He's not interested in clothing. He's not interested in the worldly pleasures that we seek, that we want. The ein kisus lo avadon. There is no clothing in the in avadon, which would be in the world, the nether world, the world in which all is destroyed and gone. So your words have no use to those people, right? In other words, those of us that are alive, that are here, we're the ones that are seeking chachma. We're the ones that are seeking wisdom, and your words are useless to us. Are they useful to those that are down in the deep? They don't care about this stuff, right? So who are you talking to? No tetzafon al tohu. He, and this is he with a capital H. God is the one who has spread tzafon over all of the tohu, right? All of the nothingness. The word tzafon, which usually means north, or it sometimes could mean things that are hidden Here it's assumed to mean by most of the commentaries the heavens. God spreads out the heavens over nothingness. Tola eretz al belima. He hangs the earth over nothing. And this is in this and in the next few verses, Eov is going to emphasize certain mysteries of physics, so to speak, mysteries of the world. When we look around us, things that we don't understand, things that don't make sense to us. Nowadays, in modern science, of course, we have explanations for most of these things, so we understand them. But there's still, of course, the one wall of lack of wisdom that we don't have, and that is what is beyond. In other words, we will never understand God. So the point is the same. The point being, the things that God does are things that we cannot explain, we cannot understand. Right? That's the point that Eov is trying to make. In other words, you keep trying to say that you understand God, that you understand God's justice. Right? That's what you and the friends are saying. I'm telling you, we don't. Right? God is the one who spreads heavens over nothingness. Right? In this world, you hang something in the air, it's going to fall, right? But God hangs the heavens in the air, and it stays there. Tola eretz, he hangs the earth, al belima, on what? On emptiness. In other words, the famous story, what is holding the world, the planet Earth in place? Why doesn't it fall? Modern science, of course, understands things differently, but we have to understand Eov in the way Eov is speaking. So why is the world just staying here? In other words, they understood in a geocentric universe, but the world is just sitting here. Why doesn't it fall? But it stands over nothing. God makes it stand there. I mean, there's still, of course, the wonder of the physics that we understand today, right? That God created a universe that we have in front of us. It's incredible how it is here. And we can never understand how there could be such a creator. So there mayim bi avav. Water remains bound up in the clouds. Why doesn't it just fall out of the clouds? But it sits in the clouds. V'lo nivka anon tachtam. And the clouds don't burst with the weight of the water. They hang as bags of water in the skies, and the water doesn't just fall right out. Me'achez penei kisei parsheiz alav anono. He closes because God closes off. In this verse, it doesn't matter what physics you use. God closes off the face of his throne. In other words, we can't see his throne. We can't understand God. God is beyond our comprehension, beyond our ability. Parsheiz alav anono. He surrounds it with his cloud. Here it doesn't mean his physical cloud. It's the metaphorical cloud. It's the lack of knowledge that we can't pierce that knowledge. Chok chag al pnei mayim. God drew a boundary on the face of the waters. This is, in the ancient world especially, they always could never understand why is it that the sea doesn't spread and swallow up the whole world. We have words of the Chazal all over the place telling us about the miracle that every wave would want to just continue going and swallow the entire earth, but it doesn't. God places a line, right? Ad tachlis orim choshech, and God does these rules of physics last and work all the way to the place, that netherworld, that place all the way out there, that unknown place, the end of place where the light meets the darkness. Amudei shemayim mirofafu, the pillars of heaven are soft and trembling, v'yitmehu migaraso, and they are in wonder and in awe from God's scream, from God's call. In other words, all of universe trembles before God. B'chocho rogayam, with the strength of God, right? Rogayam, God calmed down the sea. Machatz Rahav, and he struck down Rahav. Both here, Yam and Rahav, are names which in modern Hebrew and even in ancient Hebrew, Yam meant sea, but it inherited that word from the word Yam, which was an ancient a Middle Eastern god called Yam, which was the god of the sea, and Rahav was a Phoenician god of the sea. But using these as metaphors, right? We're saying that in front of God, these gods with small g's, right, are nothing, right? They're zero. They're nothing. Remember that these were mythical creatures in those days. The way of saying God, he smites dragons, or by the time this book was written, however you understand when Eov was written, these idols were no longer worshipped pretty much by anyone. But so this is not an idea of God versus idols. This is just a metaphor of saying how powerful God is. Berucho, this is verse 13, Shamayim Shifra. With the wind of God, the heavens work are become calm and straightened out. His hand, right, struck holes, pierced through the Nachash Bariach, another ancient mythical serpent, maybe the dragon of the sea or the sea serpent of some sort. So the bottom line is, until now in verse 13, Eov is saying, what have you added? You told me how great God is. God is beyond us. God is beyond our understanding. The things that God do are things that we cannot understand. Right? We cannot, and therefore we can also not understand. The obvious conclusion Eov is saying is we can also not understand God's justice. We can also not understand why it is, right, that I'm suffering. So stop trying to tell me that you understand my suffering, is what Eov is saying. Stop trying to think that you understand God. Stop trying to think that you can explain it. You can't, because God is beyond us, right? As Eov said in this verse, right? Me'achez p'nei chisei, parshez alav anano. Which, by the way, on Simchat Torah, on the holiday, that in Hitkapsu Malachim Zeh Zeh, it's a piyut, a poem, which is in the liturgy, which most people by then are too on that particular holiday are either are not really paying attention to the services anymore, but that makes its way into the lyrics there. Regardless, God hides himself. We don't understand God. God's throne is something we cannot see, we cannot comprehend, we cannot understand, we cannot explain. And therefore, he says in verse 14, Hen ele kitzos dirachav. These are the kitzos, the edges, the ends, or you can also look at them as these are just little tiny parts. What I described how great God is, these are just little tiny parts. This is the day of Mitzudos, miktzat dirachav, just little parts of his ways. Uma shemetz davar nishmabo. And what even tiny little remnant of things can we understand about God? In other words, we can't even understand a tiny little shemetz, a tiny little remnant, a tiny little nothing of God. We can't get even, in other words, not even that. Viram gvurasav miisponan. And the greatness of his power and the awesome thunder of his power, who can even understand and who can even think about? So stop trying to explain him. This is the ultimate argument against Eov's friends that Eov has been saying this entire time, but he finally just puts it to rest, right? So stop trying to tell me you understand God. Try trying to explain his justice, because by trying to explain it, you end up incriminating people like me. And I'm not a criminal. I'm innocent, but I'm suffering anyway. So it's much better to just say, I don't understand. I don't know. But then Eov is left with the ultimate question. I don't know and I don't understand. So I'm left. What's the purpose? What's the point? How do I find meaning in this life? And that meaning will be found in Chokhmah, in wisdom, which we are about to read in the upcoming chapters. This concludes chapter 26. We will study together. I don't think I when I said the meaning will be found in Chokhmah, that means that will be the answer to the question of theodicy. There will be actually the answer with a capital T. But you'll understand as we study this together what Eov, where he is going. But we'll continue reading Eov's response. However, chapter 27, it turns away from a response to the friends to just a monologue on the part of Eov for the next couple chapters. Then we're going to have another friend, Elihu, is going to join the club and bring some wisdom. And then, of course, we'll hear from God himself before the end of this book. But we still have a way to go. Looking forward to studying chapter 27 together and the rest of this book. Have a wonderful day.